Welcome to Dementia-Friendly Prince George's County, Maryland, Northern Sector webinar series for caregivers. Today's topic is Hope for the Alzheimer's Journey, written by Carol B. Amos. This video is sponsored by Prince George's County Government and the Department of Family Services.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you took the time out of your busy schedule to join Dementia-Friendly America of Northern Prince George's County. I am honored to be here to share some of what I learned during my journey. Thank you, Crystal Beatty and Sharon Johnson for inviting me, and Haley for being the facilitator. My 11 years of caregiving. My brothers and I cared for my mother for over 11 years. She was a widow and lived alone in Cleveland when we began to notice memory changes in 2002. And in retrospect, there were red flags as early as 1999. But in 2002, I started to see more and more of these red flags or warning signs. Things like decline in memory, misunderstanding information, difficulty doing new things, and difficulty managing herself and the household. My brother Mike lived in Cincinnati, and my brother Ron lived in Los Angeles, and I was in Wilmington, Delaware. On her 83rd birthday, I sent an email to my brothers thanking God for her 83 years of life, but I also expressed my concerns. I stated that we need to keep a watchful eye on our mother. So we increased our calls and we increased our visits. We compared notes, and my suspicions basically were confirmed that she was having problems taking care of herself. We sought out a diagnosis, and it took us 3 attempts to get Aricept prescribed as treatment. We then worked with her doctors, social workers, and community resources to help her maintain her independence and remain in her home. We hired a social worker to visit biweekly and a nurse to help with medications. But when she demonstrated that she could not live alone, we moved her to assisted living in Cleveland. And a year later, in 2005, we moved her to memory care in Delaware, where she passed away in 2014 at the age of 94. So this is a picture of my mom on my wedding day. So I'm going to try to do this presentation without a lot of sidebars, but here's the first one. As a caregiver, you are constantly making decisions with and for your loved one. And what helped me were my 2 brothers, what I call my circle of support. We made decisions jointly. We also solicited input from my mother, her siblings, and some of her close friends. So many times on this caregiving journey, you will be faced with decisions where there is no right or wrong answer. What works for someone in their situation may not work for you in their situation. I call it a personal decision. It's not a one size fits all. So what you have to do is just gather the facts, look at the pros and cons, and make a decision. And in our case, prayer was part of our decision-making process. So sometimes you may believe that you made a wrong decision, but you just have to regroup and move on. You are not an expert, and you can't predict how the decision will impact your loved one. Please do not beat yourself up. When we moved our mother to assisted living, I felt it was the right move, but we soon found out how much the disease had impacted our mother's ability to function. It was truly eye-opening watching her trying to function in unfamiliar surroundings. And it took months for her to somewhat adjust. And we spent a lot of time, coming back to Cleveland, trying to help her make this adjustment. So that was my first sidebar. So tonight's presentation, I want to begin just talking a little about Alzheimer's disease and then discuss my HOPE acronym. And I hope you will leave with some information and tips that you can start using tomorrow. So let's talk about Alzheimer's disease. It's a progressive disease, and it's a fatal brain disease that damages nerve cells and the connection between nerves. It is characterized by hallmarks of deposits of beta amyloid plaques and tau protein tangles. It is not known if these plaques and tangles causes Alzheimer's disease or if they're just a result of the disease. And there was a recent drug trial last year, maybe the year before, where they basically eliminated the buildup of amyloid beta plaque in the brain, but the disease remained. So there's so much we still don't know about this disease, and we need to increase our research so that we can learn more about this disease. So often the terms Alzheimer's and dementia are used interchangeably, but there is a difference. Dementia is the big umbrella. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, and it accounts for between 60 and 80% of all dementia cases. But there are hundreds of types of dementia, including vascular dementia, Parkinson's disease, or mixed dementia, which is a combination of multiple types of dementia. My mother had mixed dementia, a combination of Alzheimer's dementia and vascular dementia. Here are some of the warning signs, and this comes from the Alzheimer's Association for a person who we just really need to look out for. You know, you'll start seeing some signs, and here are some of the signs. Memory loss that disrupts daily life, challenges in planning or solving problems, difficulty completing familiar tasks at home. You know, they can no longer make that favorite pound cake anymore. Confusion with time or place, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships, and that comes into play, you know, if they're a driver. You know, a lot of our signs are just visual images without words. New problems with words and speaking or writing, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps, decreased or poor judgment. They may withdraw from work or from social activities because they know something isn't quite right. And you may see changes in mood and personality. So if you notice this in someone, a medical evaluation is important because the symptoms may be caused by an illness that can be treated. And the sooner you can receive treatment, the better off you are. Now, one thing about Alzheimer's disease is many of us think of it as just memory loss, but it's much more than that. Alzheimer's may impact a person's language. They may use the wrong word or the opposite word or not be able to find the word. It usually impacts their attention, so you may have to get their attention before you speak to them. You know, tap them on the shoulder, just make sure that they really are listening to you. And it impacts their perception. So like a very shiny floor may appear to them to have a hole in it. Alzheimer's case causes a decline in judgment, and this poor judgment can put the loved ones in harm's way. So you have to really keep an eye on a person because it's more than just memory loss. It impacts their abstract thinking. So certain things like sayings and time may be confusing to them. So try to be more direct with your language. It also impacts their reasoning. And so, you know, I just usually say you're better off just not trying to reason with a person with Alzheimer's. So this disease impacts many functions of the brain, and realizing that it impacts more than just memory can help you understand your loved one and their behaviors. So then there's what's called mild cognitive impairment, and it's basically people with mild memory issues are basically diagnosed with this. And so my mother was initially diagnosed with MCI, and that is why they wouldn't prescribe Aricept for her. So it's a precursor, but not everyone with MCI will eventually develop Alzheimer's disease. If you know someone with MCI, you do really need to keep a watchful eye on them because it can change. It can eventually develop into Alzheimer's disease and cause a dangerous situation. So your loved one could start a fire in the kitchen, become a victim of a scam, or become a missing person. So keep a watchful eye on persons with MCI. They're fine, but they still need to have you keep an eye on them. So here are some of the behaviors you'll see, and this is from the Alzheimer's Association while interacting with a person with Alzheimer's disease. The aggression, the agitation, confusion, depression, hallucinations, suspicion, sleep issues, and sundowning, repetition, and wandering. And as a caregiver, you're always just trying to de-escalate, any of these situations. And sometimes what you can do is, try to even change the subject, try to help them understand that you feel where they are, you understand where they are. What can I do to help you? So if you look at some of these behaviors are used as a form of communication. So your loved one may be in pain, and older Americans, a large percentage of them have some kind of recurring pain. So they could be in pain, or they may have another need that is not being met. They may be hungry, they may be cold, they may need to go to the bathroom. So, if you ask them, what's going on, try to get a better feel, then that may be the cause of some of these behaviors. And keep in mind that the Alzheimer's Association has a 24/7 helpline, and they can give you some advice when it comes to managing some of these behaviors. And their number is 1-800-272-3900. Every caregiver should basically memorize that telephone number. So I just want to give you a little background on Alzheimer's disease. So I hope I've given you a little more insight into it. So let's move to my HOPE presentation. So I basically have a passion to help caregivers. So in 2018, I published my book, HOPE for the Alzheimer's Journey. And it's a caregiver guide based on my 11 years of caregiving. And it introduces the caregiving principle, which is a framework that helps caregivers have a less stressful, more rewarding journey. So it's not easy being a caregiver to someone living with any form of dementia. So I want to share a few readings from my book. And the first one is from chapter 1, but I remember when my father was dying of cancer, I kept telling myself this was not how I would remember him. I was there for my father in those last days, but in the back of my mind, I focused on the pleasant memories. I found myself using a similar technique with my mother when she moved here to Delaware. I thought of my mother as she and her and mother, but not mom or the mom, as we called her. We would say, don't mess with the mom or my mom. So realizing that slowly, in a way, I was distancing myself from my mother was so crucial to reestablishing a more rewarding relationship. I could not keep her at arm's length. Throughout our lives, our mother supported my brothers and me 110%, and I wanted to do the same for her. I am so glad I embraced mom and the Alzheimer's disease. I have so many precious memories from our time in Delaware I will treasure for the rest of my life. I could not imagine her on this Alzheimer's journey without my 110% support. So I had to find my mom that was hiding inside. I may not have liked her behavior, but she was still my mom. She may have said the wrong thing, but she was my mom. So another reading to help set the stage is caring for a person with Alzheimer's is also difficult because it takes a physical and emotional toll on the caregiver. In the early phase of our mother's disease, my brother Mike used the phrase, "It's not her fault she has Alzheimer's disease." This phrase was a reminder for my brothers and me to treat mom with dignity and respect, not take our frustrations out on mom, not take mom's personal attacks personally. That was hard to do. Not blame mom for doing what she should not do, not blame mom for not doing what she should do. Pause before reacting to mom's behavior and have patience, patience, patience. Caregivers must exhibit a lot of self-control. And this last reading is actually an email. So in the book, even though it's a caregiving guide, I do tell my story. And I tell a lot of the story by using emails that were sent between my brothers and I. And this is an email from my brother, Mike. And he said, "Life is not easy for mom, but she bravely continues to look forward to each day. We need to continue what we are doing, the telephone calls, mail, visits, etc., letting her know how much we love and appreciate her for what she has done and is doing." So those are just a few of the readings from my book. So what I'm going to do is this is the first time I've actually presented this. This is my HOPE presentation. And if you think of the HELP, the organization, the preparation and education as 4 books on a bookshelf, and then there are the bookends. So the first bookend is HOPE. And so my biggest lesson as a caregiver was to be hopeful, because hope helps to regulate your mindset and your emotions. I discovered early on that my emotions would directly impact my mother's emotions and behavior. So if I saw that my mom was going south, getting negative on something, I would quickly say something positive to try to change her mindset. And that actually helped, probably 50% of the time. But hope allowed me to watch my mother decline from this debilitating illness. It was hope that told me I could be the daughter and the caregiver that she needed for the remaining years of her life. So throughout this journey, I learned to seek out and find God's blessings, which I call God's rays of hope. For example, getting unexpected help. I was taking mom to urgent care one day, and I was having a hard time helping her get out the car because she would never know if she's getting in the car or out the car. And some lady just came and said, "Let me show you the correct way of helping your mother out of the car." I mean, it was just ideal at that time because, I was sort of like, sort of a little frustrated. They called and they said, "Hey, she needs to go to urgent care." So she wasn't feeling well. And just that unexpected help. Mom getting unexpected money, mom not having behavior issues. That was, for me, one of God's rays of help. Time when there were just like no pressing issues or things you had to do. Times when mom appeared to be improving. Listening to mom actually use sound logic sort of against you, And that was always sort of funny. It's like, "Yeah, mom, that's a good point, but using sound logic." Or just sitting there watching my mother enjoy the moment. So these instances gave me hope and lifted my spirits and gave me the strength to continue. So hope is the left bookend. The first book in the Hope Toolkit is HELP. So caregivers must reach out for help from family, friends, the faith community, community resources, medical, legal, financial, and caregiving professionals to develop a circle of support. So I'm going to discuss each of these in more details. And so I sort of missed that scale, but this slide, but these are some examples of God's rays of hope. And so reach out to family and friends, other professional caregivers, community resources. So family and friends. I was truly blessed to have a brother on each of my arms for most of my journey. I'm grateful that our successes collectively strengthened us and provided a hopeful outlook for the next crisis that arose. It was natural for Ron and Mike and I to unite when Mom began to exhibit signs of memory loss. We were different persons with different perspectives, but the same objective, which was to provide excellent care for our mother. My brothers were the foundation of my support. We were the inner circle. We worked extremely well together and made all decisions jointly. None of us had knowledge in this area, so we spent a lot of time making our decisions. We conducted research, spoke to others, and engaged in discussions. We often solicited input from Mom to understand her wishes and concerns. And when we collectively made a decision, we each supported it 100%. Our agreement was important to provide a consistent message to our mother. But you have to realize that not everyone will be eager to join you. Caregiving is a huge responsibility, and then some family members may be in denial. Be specific. Be specific when you ask for help, but accept whatever help you can get. Be sure to include persons who may be physically distant. So in my case, Ron lived in California, and so he only visited once or twice a year. He worked at a hospital, and he would seek out medical input for all of my mother's various medical situations. So sometimes if I ended up in the emergency room, send out an email to Ron, and then he'll talk to people he knows, and she needs to have this test or make sure they do that. So it really helped me, because I'm trying to keep Mom comfortable, but they're looking at what do we really need to do here. But he also conducted like internet research, such as when we were moving her, finding a storage facility and a moving company. And he also kept my mother's siblings informed of her situation. So even though he was remote, he was an active member of our team. And our roles changed as the situation changed. For instance, when my mother moved to memory care in Delaware, I had a much more active role in her care. Two of our mother's sisters were part of our circle. One visited every week when she lived in Cleveland. Other relatives and friends provided support. And we received a lot of good support from our mother's friends because they knew her well. They understood her concerns and spoke basically for her. So one of her friends told me that our mother wanted Mike to manage her finances, not me. And so I could have easily become upset. Why is that? I'm your daughter. You don't trust me with your money. But no, instead we just eased our mother's concern and just let her know, hey, Mike is going to manage your finances. And as an aside, if you look at the three of us, Ron was always spending money. I was sort of like in the middle, and Mike was the cheapest of the three. So, if I was in my mother's situation, I would have probably selected Mike as well. Also, seek help from medical professionals. It's important to get a proper diagnosis from a memory or dementia specialist and begin treatment if warranted. Please don't just rely on a diagnosis from a primary care physician. The PCP should be the first stop, but not the last stop, because I hear of many, many cases of people being misdiagnosed. So if you get your loved one to a specialist, they will basically rule out other causes of the symptoms. They know that vitamin deficiencies, hormone imbalances, medication overload, depression, or even sleep apnea can cause some of the memory symptoms. So the doctors will do extensive blood tests, cognitive tests, brain scan, and other tests. And as a caregiver, you just have to be patient and complete all of the tests they recommend. They may recommend you see another specialist. And you are basically hoping that they find the cause of the memory loss that is treatable, unlike Alzheimer's disease. So just try to be patient. It's like, what, you want me to see someone else? And I remember one neurologist saw something, and he said, let's go ahead, I want to do this evaluation. And I wasn't just thinking of my mom, I was thinking, well, she has sisters in similar situations. So if he finds something that can help her, he may also find something that will help her siblings. But caregivers also have to be advocates for their loved one. And I mentioned it took 3 tries to get our mother on an Alzheimer's medication. The doctors initially diagnosed her with mild cognitive impairment, but eventually diagnosed her with dementia as her condition worsened. So as an advocate, do not be shy about asking questions, getting a second opinion, or even changing doctors. We had one doctor, we just, we had to replace him because we just thought he was doing excessive tests. And so you have to remember you're in control of that. And when a person has Alzheimer's, to be doing these tests every 6 months, you got to take them out. I think he was just wasting our money. And then the doctor she went to, she said, she basically said she's not going to die from that. There's too many other things that she'll, pass away from. This is, if there is something there, it's going to be slow growing, and you don't have to evaluate it every month. So you just have to use some kind of judgment when you're doing this. But unfortunately, there's no medication that will cure Alzheimer's disease. The drugs that are prescribed, such as H.O.P.E and Dementia, really just help with behaviors. And although these drugs are safe, some patients experience side effects. So please monitor your loved one when they begin any new drug. And then also obtain medical care for their other medical issues. So my mother had arthritic knees, osteoporosis, low weight, cataracts, and high cholesterol that was being monitored. Also seek help from financial and legal professionals. Caregivers often have to become investigators to just pull together the tremendous amount of information needed as a caregiver. Hopefully your loved one is able to help you with some of the information, such as medical history, doctors, insurance. You need to understand your loved one's financial situation, especially if you will have to pay their bills. Understand the rules in your state to qualify for Medicaid if it's appropriate. Reach out to financial and legal professionals to ensure that you have the information and the legal documentation to act on your loved one's behalf. Make sure your loved one has executed a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and a will. And these documents help convey their wishes when they no longer can. But realize that your loved one will probably not be of sound mind to sign these documents again. So make sure you designate alternates to carry out their wishes in case someone passes away or is unable to perform the duties. Also reach out, to community resources. So I'm glad that you all have reached out to Dementia Friendly America, and you can also receive help from places like the Department of Aging, senior and community centers, faith centers, libraries. My brother Mike had sort of a habit, like if he ever went into a waiting room, he would go through and he'd start looking through all the different pamphlets to see if there was something that would be useful for my mother to use. And if you are employed, investigate what resources are available through your employer, because sometimes the employee assistance programs may offer some resources to you. Also reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. I am proud to be an advocate and a volunteer for the association. And when my brothers and I started our journey, we each went to our respective office of the Alzheimer's Association to get information and some advice on how to proceed. So, they offer a lot. The 24/7 helpline, support groups, care consultation, good information, library, website. The community resource finder I like to use for even people who aren't dealing with dementia. You can go in and find adult daycare centers, medical kind of facilities. So it's really a good resource, not only just for people with Alzheimer's. And then they also have the safe return for wanderers. So Alzheimer's Association. So these are some of the different groups and organizations that you can reach out to get help. And they can become part of your circles of support, and they can give you the support that you need so that you don't feel that you are alone. So the second book in the HOPE Toolkit is organization. And organization is key because caregivers have to manage schedules. Sometimes you have multiple caregivers coming in and appointments, and there are apps you can use if you have different family members coming in at different times and trying to schedule them. Organization was key to our visits to our mother in Cleveland. We developed a prioritized list of what needed to be done, and initially our list basically included, taking her to doctor appointments and helping her with household projects. But eventually we had to add, emptying and selling her house and helping her transition to assisted living. So organization helped us to maximize the time that we were there. And so we always made sure we did something fun with her, went to church with her, or just did some things that, she would just enjoy. So it wasn't always work, but that was part of the schedule. We built it in. So organization is critical for all the paperwork you manage for your loved one. It's critical. So one of the things we did was we purchased a 2-drawer filing cabinet that we put in one of my mother's closets at home. And, we were able to put all of her paperwork sort of in one place. And it had actually 2 purposes. We would always tell her, okay, you can just file it away. But it turned out she wasn't filing anything. At best, she would, if a bill came in, she would just put it on top of the file cabinet. But my brother Mike and I would say, well, we would hide things in there. Okay, you need such and such, and we didn't want mom to misplace it. So we would put it in the file cabinet because we knew she wouldn't go in the file cabinet. So that was, we didn't know that when we bought it, but it was really useful for us. You need the whatever, ABC is there, drawer number 2. But then also, and that's the picture that I'm missing, I bought one of those plastic file bins to have stuff that I needed here, at my home. And so everything was in one place. So when my brothers visited, if they were taking her to doctors or whatever, they knew where all of mom's stuff was. It was in one place, it was on wheels. And I think by the time she passed away, I think I had filled up about 3 of those different bins. But it kept everything in one place. And because it would get confusing because we had some of the same doctors. So if I didn't keep it separated, I'd have a hard time finding things. So organization is key. And then I do on my website have some organization templates, things such as a medication list and doctor directory. And I even did a spreadsheet where I was basically projecting, when she would run out of money. I mean, most caregivers, that's what you're sort of looking at. Okay, when is she going to run out of money? And I assume all the costs are going to go up 3% every year. But that was very, very useful. But one of the most useful tools was the doctor directory, because my mom had like 15 to 25 doctor appointments each year. And so by putting them on this list, you could sort of say, okay, the dentist, she needs to see the dentist twice a year, so it'd be the first quarter and the third quarter. So we did that with all of her doctors so that we sort of could proactively plan all of the visits. And so then I could schedule these appointments, like 3 to 4 or 5 appointments, on a Thursday and a Friday. And that's when my brother would come and just basically take her to a doctor appointment. So it really reduced the amount of time that I had to, spend taking her to doctor appointments. So, she had one up in Philly. Well, you all are going to be the ones taking her to Philly. I had done it before. And the other thing is these were like routine appointments. I got involved with the, get her to urgent care. So, but, they were able to do a lot of, knock out, 4 or 5 appointments, a quarter. So that helped me, and it gave them a chance to meet, her doctors, and her doctors to meet them. All right, the next book in our toolkit is Preparation. And I put together a document. It's called 7 Steps to Prepare for the Alzheimer's Journey. It begins with having a discussion with your loved one. You have to have an honest discussion, and you might have to do it in parts. You may not be able to go as far or as deep as you want to, because it's it's really an emotional thing. But you want to understand, how do they feel about the diagnosis? What are their wants? What are their fears? And what are their concerns? And be sure to not make promises that you do not believe you'll carry out. You both have to be honest, but you also have to reassure your loved one that you're going to be there to support them. So we sort of discussed the next 5 things on this list: seeking out medical support and recruiting your circle of support, understanding your loved one's financial situation, executing the legal documents, and identifying resources in your area. But the last one we haven't discussed, and I'm going to discuss it in more detail in a little later. So the caregiving principle is something I developed because, as I was analyzing our situation, it just sort of like jumped out at me. And it's basically, I do full, 1-hour sessions on the caregiving principle. So I'm going to give you the short version. It basically says the needs of the person minus the needs that they can fill equals the needs to be filled by the caregivers. So it's sort of a framework for the caregivers to know what they really have to do. So your loved one has needs. Your loved one will be able to meet some of their needs. And in the early stages, your loved one can take care of most of their needs. They basically just need a little oversight. But the thing is, as they continue to decline, they're going to need more and more help. And as a caregiver, you have to sort of be out ahead of the game. You have to find and figure out what comes next. So when we found out that my brother, when we found out that my mother could no longer live alone, my brother had already started to search, and he had found an assisted living facility 6 months prior to the need. And so this advanced need, this advanced work made a very stressful time, time when you're moving your mom, selling a house, less stressful because we didn't have to spend a lot of time researching a lot of facilities. But we could have done more in advance, and we really were not prepared when only after a year in assisted living we needed to move our mother again. But we did a thorough review of assisted living memory care facilities in Wilmington. And once my mother was situated in Delaware, we were able to prepare for the next phase. So we conducted an assessment of nursing homes, hospice, and funeral homes. And yes, it can be morbid, but for us, the advanced funeral preparation allowed us to focus on my mother during her final days. You also have to prepare for, everyday kinds of events, medical appointments, where do you park? How much walking will your loved one have? Preparing for visitors. And one of the things that I did, and I was really happy about it, was I prepared for when I prepared for a lot of her social activities to see if it would be appropriate for her. And so you need to really make sure you do something periodically with your loved one, something that's just fun and special, because social outings build an opportunity to just build cherished memories. So my mother loved to watch figure skating on television, so I took her to a program at the Wilmington Skating Club. And when I considered this activity, I prepared by calling the club because I was concerned because she was always cold. So I was concerned about her sitting in the skating rink. And they said, hey, we have a warm section with a good view of the skating rink. So that's what I did. So I took my mom to the warm section of the skating rink, and she really enjoyed the event, told the caregivers all about the event. And so she remembered the skating program for a long time. And it's something I will cherish for the rest of my life. So, and you may also need to prepare for visitors. When's a good time to come? Like for me, for my mother's situation, if you visited her while she was playing bingo, she may not have been as hospitable as she would have been if it was during another time. So I just always had to make sure things would go well with her, because sometimes it takes very little to sort of like turn, your loved one off. And so I wanted things to go smoothly, because if it wasn't going right, what I might hear is, just take me home, just take me home. So I never wanted that to happen. I wanted her to enjoy the event. So the last book is education. So Alzheimer's Association has classes, support groups, and I've participated in some of their virtual classes, all over the country. I was one in California, one out of, I think, Virginia, because once you go on, it's virtual. You can participate wherever you want. Also, allsauthors.com. And I think we may have a couple Oz authors. I know Loretta is here, but it's a website. You can go on and you can find all kinds of books on Alzheimer's. I'm writing about my relationship with my mother, but there are people writing because they have dementia. There are people writing to help you explain it to your grandchildren or to your loved ones' grandchildren. So there's just all kinds of books. So visit allsauthors.com and purchase a few books. As a caregiver, when I would buy a book, I never bought a book where I didn't get something out of it that was worth the $10 or $15 I spent on it. So build your library, because knowledge is power. So the right bookend is basically you. You have to take care of yourself. So you have a tremendous role as a caregiver. All the indirect caregiving you have to do, the housework, and sometimes you can find someone to help. Like my brother Mike took care of all the majority of the financial stuff. Sometimes I had to get involved with the insurance stuff, but he took care of most of that, so I didn't have to worry about that. You want to make sure your loved one receives, proper medical care. You also want to be a friend to your loved one. A lot of times, you're the only one that can, assume that role. You also have to be educated about the disease. So I'm really glad you came out, to learn a little more about caregiving. And although it's last on the list, and here's the list, take care of yourself. It's very important. So caregivers must take taking care of themselves a priority. There will be times when you need to put your needs above the needs of your loved one. It's hard to do, but sometimes you have to do that. And so my mother understood this in theory. And in my book, I begin each chapter with a personal reflection. And in chapter 25, entitled, What About Me? This is my reflection. In the fall, as dusk began to fall, my mother would rush me out of her room and tell me to go home. She said, I want you to arrive home safely because I'd be lost without you. I worried about being able to care for mom. A car accident or a normal illness could have prevented me from providing care. Caregiving was a balancing act between my needs and my mother's. If I did not take care of myself, I would be unable to take care of her. So caregivers need to heed my mother's advice and develop a plan to take care of themselves. And so my plan was to continue to work at DuPont, but and I also continued in ministry involvement at my church and with tennis, but it was at a reduced level. I knew I couldn't do it all. I reached out to God and my church family for strength and support, and I prayed that my mother, would have more good days than bad days. God continually sent me rays of hope. So also keep current with your routine medical care and screenings. Pace yourself. Your loved one can live with this disease for 10, 15, or 20 years. Try to keep things simple. So caregiving is stressful, so I try to reduce stress in other parts of my life. So at one point, I took the bus to work to avoid driving in stressful rush hour traffic. So if you find yourself being irritable, these are the signs of caregiving stress. And I'm just going to read some of the words in bold: denial, anger, withdrawal, anxiety, depression, exhaustion, sleeplessness, irritability, moodiness, negative, lack of concentration, health problems. And as a caregiver, you're probably going to experience this at some point. The key is to not continue to experience this. Everybody gets to a point where it's like, I can't take anymore, but you have to figure out how to take care of yourself. So if you have any of these signs, reach out to relatives and friends, your faith leader, or your primary care physician. Each year, I allotted 2 days of vacation just for me. So when I experienced some of these feelings, I usually took a half-day vacation to regroup or do something just for me, like sleep or play tennis. And these signs can also mean that you need to get more help with caregiving. So there are too many statistics about the toll caregiving can take on you. So please spend tomorrow thinking about how you can better take care of yourself. Is it more help? Is it more quality time for yourself? One thing I used to do is drive the scenic route home from my mother's memory care. It took an extra 5 to 10 minutes, but spending time in nature helped to rejuvenate me. So in conclusion, this is your hope toolkit. Be hopeful, reach out for help, get organized, be prepared, become educated on Alzheimer's disease and caregiving, and take care of yourself. So as a caregiver, you have an awesome responsibility. When you first realize your loved one's memory loss, you had to deal with your own emotions and play catch up. You had to find, decipher, and figure out their medical situation, finances, insurance, bills, and legal situation. And it's a lot. And it can take almost a year to just somewhat get things in order. So right now, I want you to acknowledge all that you have already done. And on behalf of your loved one, I thank you. In the words of my mom, your loved one would be lost without you. So let's say thanks to all the caregivers on the line and to the staff at Dementia Friendly America, Prince George's County. So thank you, caregivers and DFA.